Today we're looking at the future of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Are we going to see substantial, massive changes to this lineup, including the possible departures of Kris Letang, Evgeni Malkin, Brian Rust? Could Marc-Andre Fleury return to the franchise where he begun his career to finish things up? Plus, we have the latest on KHL free agent Andrei Kuzmenko and where he might end up in the NHL. We have the latest updates from the playoffs, some more signings as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at a variety of NHL news and rumors. Let's get started with a quick update from the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs from last night. We saw the Carolina Hurricanes take a 2-0 series lead with a 2-0 game victory against the New York Rangers last night. The Rangers really didn't play overly well at all, really couldn't get much of anything going. Carolina really carried the pace of that game. They scored in the second period a shorthanded goal from Brendan Smith, followed by a late one to finish things up 2-0. So the Rangers find themselves down in a fairly big hole against the Carolina Hurricanes, heading back to MSG for games 3 and 4. The Battle of Alberta, of course, did calm down a little bit last night. The first game was a 9-6 win for the Flames. This one was a 5-3 win for the Oilers. So we cut down the goals against from 15 down to 8, which is still a fairly high-scoring playoff game, but a lot more reasonable than before. Once again, though, the Oilers' goaltending looked to be shaky early, with the Flames getting out to a 2-0 lead early on. They had leads of 2-0 and 3-1 fairly early in that game, but the Oilers and Connor McDavid was on a mission, helped bring that team back, and they did eventually get things tied and then move forward and go on for a 5-3 victory. All 5 goals were scored with Jacob Markstrom in the net. I never would have thought after 2 games in this series that the Oilers would have been able to score 11 goals on Jacob Markstrom, who is one of the Vezina Trophy finalists. He is an excellent goalie, had a solid campaign, one of the best in the league, and he hasn't been overly great either, giving up that's a lot of goals. So certainly an interesting series. Now the series shifts to Edmonton for games 3 and 4, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's some players banged up on both sides. Tanev has been out for the Flames. Draisaitl's on 100%, but has been playing and has been contributing to a degree as well. So he's certainly not 100%, but he's still better than a lot of the options that they could put out there. So certainly some very highly entertaining games. Now tonight, of course, on Saturday night, we only have the one game. The schedule's been changed here a bit because of the Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers getting an extra day. So the Avs and Blues play game 3 tonight in St. Louis. And then after that, we have 3 games on the slate for tomorrow for Sunday, with the Lightning and Panthers doing game 3 as well as the other 2 series that went last night: Oilers, Flames, Canes, Rangers. Now, on to some other news here today. We got word that the Red Wings have signed Taro Hirose to a 2-year contract extension. He's gotten some playing time with the Red Wings at the NHL level, but has been a pretty solid contributor to the American Hockey League level, and has been a call-up option, gotten some opportunities, so they're going to continue to work with him on his development. He was a college free agent signing for Detroit a couple of years back. We also got word that the Calgary Flames have signed one of their prospects here, Ilya Nikolaev. It's a 3-year entry-level contract. He was a 2019 third-round selection and has been playing junior hockey in the U.S. HL. We also got an update in Vancouver. We know that Bruce Boudreau is going to be back as the head coach, but he did confirm that assistant coach Scott Walker will not be returning to the Canucks next season. So they're on a search right now to find a new assistant coach to join Boudreau's staff in Vancouver for next season. Now, we also got word on a few players that likely is going to be leaving the NHL here and signing contracts very shortly and going to Europe for next season. That includes Winnipeg Jets prospect Christian Vesalainen, who's the former first-round pick. It's really unfortunate. I know when he was first drafted, he looked like he had a ton of potential, but he's really never materialized with the at the AHL level. Even hasn't been a really solid game, so he's expected to be playing in Sweden, expected to sign in Malmo in the SHL next year. So we'll see Winnipeg, if they extend a qualifying offer to him, because he is an RFA, they are able to retain his rights should he look to make a jump back to the NHL at some time down here in the future. And there's also word that Mikko Koskinen, yes, currently in the playoffs here with the Edmonton Oilers. We know he's a pending unrestricted free agent, that he will not be seeking another NHL contract. It's been revealed, I believe it was Bob Hartley that revealed it, that he's expected to be signing over in the Swiss League with HC Lugano. So we'll see if that's true. I know the Oilers, I certainly didn't expect him to be re-signed there. I wondered if he might get another NHL opportunity or not, but it looks like he's planning to head over to Europe. So he may not be in the NHL at all once his playoff run here with the Edmonton Oilers finally comes to a close. And when it comes to players moving around, the Vancouver Canucks are right now, according to Rick Dollywall and Thomas Drance, expected to be the front runners, you could say, for KHL free agent forward Andrei Kuzmenko. Of course, Kuzmenko has gotten a lot of attention from around the league. Lots of teams wanted to speak to him. He's a 26-year-old player who had a pretty solid year in Russia, put up 53 points in 45 games this past year, and wants to sign with the place. It's not, overly concerned about location, just wants an opportunity to be able to play in an offensive role, and wanted to know more because he's likely getting a one-year deal to start, and then from there can sign an extension either in January or get a new contract next offseason, but wants to be able to stay with a team, and a team that's going to be able to find room not only for next year but for the next foreseeable future as well. And actually one more player that looks to be leaving the NHL is Columbus Blue Jacket defenseman Dean Kukan. He is expected to head back and sign in the Swiss League here as well. So we'll get confirmation on those players between Koskinen, Vesalainen, and Kukan. Right now that's the rumored locations for their playing next year, but we will get confirmations of that later and confirmed. So it should be interesting to say the least. If any of them make an NHL return at some point. Now we also got the update on the NHL awards. We got the King Clancy Award finalists, which is an award for leadership and humanitarian contributions. The finalists are newly announced retired player Ryan Getzlaf, so he'll be a finalist here in his final season, along with PK Subban and Darnell Nurse. So of course they've all done a good job of doing charitable contributions in some fashion, so they are the finalists for the award for this season. Now, of course, in the rumor section of today's video, we're going to take a look here at the future of the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's an interesting team to watch for sure. They've got some big names, some legacy players that may be done. They might be on the move, and we'll explore that here as we discuss that situation. But essentially, I looked at a couple of different articles from The Athletic, a couple of different Penguin writers from Josh Yeo and Rob Rossi. Both very well connected with the Penguins, and it seems like a part of the decisions here are probably going to be coming from new ownership. Now, back earlier towards the beginning of the season, it was announced that the Penguins, owned by Muriel Lemieux and Ron Burkle, were being sold to Fenway Sports Group. So, of course, Fenway Sports Group owns a variety of teams, of course, including the Boston Red Sox and Fenway Park, and they have their own way of doing things. Now, of course, what happens when you get new ownership, that's quite usually the case that they kind of want to have their own people run the show. It's not unusual by any means. I believe they, agreed to let everybody kind of finish the season. But at this point, according to the reports in The Athletic, the ownership basically wanted Ron Hextall as a general manager of the Penguins to submit like a vision report, if you will, to them in writing on how he sees the future of this team for them to analyze. Now, I believe at the beginning, Hextall was like, well, I kind of have, I have things kind of upstairs here in my head, but I'm not sure how well I can put it in a report or in writing. But he was told to do it anyway, and that believes to be where things stand now. Now, I'm not sure how quickly he was doing that. That was mid-season. I'm assuming that's more of an end-of-season type of thing. And if you think about it here, it's interesting that the Penguins are one of the few teams that haven't really spoken. You've seen all the other teams as they had their, for the teams that missed the playoffs and the ones that have been beaten out of the playoffs so far, majority of them have already come out with their coaches and GMs and kind of done like an end-of-season media availability. And we have not heard from Ron Hextall. We have not heard from Brian Burke, the president of Hockey Ops. So it's kind of interesting that that has not taken place. The Penguins have been out of the playoffs now for some time. All the other teams beaten out around the same time have gone through this process. It's common. It happens pretty much all the time, every year for teams as their season finishes. That tells us that they may not be ready to speak to the media yet, because there's probably a lot of things they don't have the questions or the answers to the questions that they're going to be asked. At least that's what things appear to be. So if the fact that ownership wanted Hextall to submit his written vision for the club, that to me says maybe they're still making a decision. And there's some people that feel that Ron Hextall and Brian Burke, as the leadership group here at the management level for the Penguins, they could be on the hot seat. And it's not that they've done a terrible job. It's just that the ownership here might want to have their own people run this franchise. Really haven't even been on the job all that long. I mean, it was only a couple of years back that Jim Rutherford somewhat abruptly resigned his GM position with the Penguins. They hired Ron Hextall and then, of course, brought in Brian Burke as president of hockey operations. So it's been reported here that Evgeni Malkin and Kris Letang, of course, two big-time legacy players there, they've been a huge part of that team winning 3 Stanley Cups, are free agents and have been offered contracts that are pretty low and some people say are kind of insulting a little bit. Both appear to be around 3-year contracts to match Crosby's finishing up of his contract. He has 3 years left, and that's kind of what they had in mind to have them all kind of expire around the same time. Now, in the case of Malkin, he appeared to be okay with a 3 or 4 year term contract, but appears that the money was nowhere near what he was thinking. Now, Malkin's 35 years old, coming off a contract where he was earning $9.5 million. You also have to factor in how much time Malkin misses. He is a guy who suffered a lot of injuries. Yes, he's still a productive player when he's on the ice, but that's the problem, is you can only bank on him being there about half the time. And as recently as the last couple of years, he's still right around a point per game player and can be a very dominating player at times. But he has not played an 82-game season since the 08-09 season. He's been one of those players that, to a degree, because of how he plays, that he's just a little bit more susceptible to suffering a lot of injuries and missing a lot of time. So it's certainly something they want to be careful with. And for him to stay and finish out his career based on the salary cap and his age, I don't think that the Penguins are going to go anywhere near $9 million. Now, Malkin's made it clear that it's not all about money, but at the same time, he has to look after his family and wants a fair deal. So what he feels is fair and what the Penguins feel is fair might be completely different things. And I know a lot of the Penguin reporters in Pittsburgh right now are putting this at best 50-50 chance that Evgeni Malkin stays. Now, if Evgeni Malkin were to leave, where might he end up? That's a big question. Maybe he goes to the division rival in Washington and play with his buddy Alex Ovechkin. I know they've had their issues over the years, but they're still pretty good friends to the best of my knowledge. Maybe would he team up with any of his other Russian hockey player buddies? I don't really know where he could go. I know a team like Boston might be missing a center iceman because Bergeron could retire. They're already weak at that position because of the Krejci loss last year. I'm not sure he would go to Boston, but that's just a thought of where there would be a need. A team like the Rangers in their division would be possibly looking at a center iceman, but they might not have they wouldn't have an easy time affording what kind of contract he would want. So it's hard to say. It's really hard to see Malkin in any other uniform, but it's just hard to imagine where things are out negotiating wise. It does really sound like the odds of a contract coming to an agreement on here is slim. Now, in the case of Letang, he's also 35. But he also has overcome a lot of health issues, been a lot more durable in more recent years, and hit a career high in points this year. Now, the problem is, because of all that, he's making $7.25 million, and it's reported that he doesn't want to take a pay cut. He wants to make as much or more. And probably wants a term of about 5 years on the contract, which is even longer than what Crosby or Malkin would have left on their deals, assuming Malkin signed a contract to match the ending of Crosby's contract. That might be a little bit too rich for the Penguins, considering all things, but at the same time, you can make an argument that he might even be more vital and more important for the Penguins to try to retain if they can only retain one of the two. That blue line is already not the strongest, certainly an area that they should probably work on improving, and he's the biggest part of it. You take Kris Letang out of that blue line, and it's completely different. I mean, it's hard to imagine playing anywhere else, but there's certainly been a lot of rumors about Montreal, given his agent, or former agent, Ken Hughes, is now the GM there. And of course, he is from Quebec, so Hard to say, but to some degree it makes sense, and a lot of degrees it doesn't, so I don't know. Brian Rust has been greatly underpaid as well. He's certainly outperformed his contract in recent years at $3.5 million. He's certainly well outperformed that, and he's going to be looking for a substantial raise. I don't really know for sure what Rust is going to be looking for, but I'm sure it's going to be up around $5 or $6 million for sure. I mean, he's been a pretty consistent top 6 guy producing at a high level, so he's certainly earned himself a nice raise. And on top of that, you got guys like Rickard Rakell, Evan Rodriguez, you got Kasperi Kapanens and RFA. Like they have a lot of guys to make a decision on here. They have $29 million in cap space, but that's not a lot to go around when you factor in what all these players could possibly make if they stay in Pittsburgh. And the fact that there's a lot of people speculating that Marc-Andre Fleury wants to return to Pittsburgh. Now, we don't know exactly on if the Penguins are mutually interested here as well, but certainly something to keep in mind. Of course, with Tristan Jarry still under contract, but Casey DeSmith is a UFA, it does present an opportunity for Pittsburgh to have an opening there where they could consider that if the term and money that Marc-Andre Fleury wants is right. Now, he said before that he wanted to play at least one more year, so I'm not sure if he'd be willing to do a one-year contract. What would that look like? Would he be willing to take maybe $4 or $5 million? Then that's something that they might be able to work with. If that's the case and run like a 1A, 1B with Tristan Jarry, then at least they'd be pretty solid between the pipes. And of course, the rest of the positions would kind of depend on how a lot of these other contract negotiations play out. But it certainly appears like we could see a significant change, an end of an era, if you will, in Pittsburgh. And it's quite a real possibility that Malkin and Letang may not be back because their contracts they're looking for might just be too long and too much money for what this new ownership group is willing to pay. We know they're very analytics driven. We've seen how they've operated with other franchises, and if they're waiting on or in the process of reviewing a vision for Ron Hextall, you have to wonder what the future holds for him as well. Could we see a really chaotic summer in Pittsburgh where they end up bringing in a whole new regime and possibly seeing some legacy players leave town as well? Let me know your thoughts on how complicated this summer is going to be for Pittsburgh in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.